Today we're gonna talk about God Emperor of Dune by Frank Herbert. Where to begin? This is a very peculiar book in the series. This is the fourth book in the series, and it is a stepping stone because of what happens. And I'm going to preface this review with something that I've said in my previous review about Frank Herbert as a writer. Now, this book proves yet again that Frank Herbert is a good writer. But what he fails at creating a engaging story, and he fails at writing endearing human characters. I've said this before about sci-fi writers. I haven't read all of them, but I have read a decent amount of the most of the famous ones. And I have sort of created this theory. A lot of sci-fi writers, they have amazing ideas. You know, they're ahead of their time, right? Their philosophies, their ideologies, their theories, and sometimes they make incredible predictions. But sci-fi writers, now this does not apply to all of them, but a lot of sci-fi writers I've noticed, they can't write a good story for shit. They just can't. They just can't, right? And they cannot write, interesting, endearing, and most importantly, they cannot write human characters. They cannot. Now, is this a bad quality to have as a writer? I would say yes. You have to have interesting human characters that seduce you, and you have to have an alluring story, right? This book does not have any of those traits. In this book, God Emperor of Dune, Frank Herbert shines by rounding up his ideas. In Children of Dune, his writing was becoming more sophisticated. His ideas were being put to the forefront. But now, in God Emperor of Dune, yet again, his writing, in terms of his ideas, of expressing his ideas and opinions and philosophies and what have you, yet again, he shines at just delivering his ideas for everybody to understand. He doesn't use complex or overly complex language and words. He delivers, and his ideas are, for the most part, understandable. The best part of this book, the best part of this book are these excerpts at the beginning of each chapter, right? From Leto's stolen journals. This is where obviously Frank Herbert's writing really just pops off. His ideas about government, about religion, about leadership, about an empire, right? About beliefs, traditions, customs, right? And so on. Here is where Frank Herbert just captivates you with his ideas. Now, some of them are a bit complex. You have to read them a couple of times to get them, but overall, this is the best part of this novel. It is obvious to me that he uses Leto II Atreides, the God Emperor, the Worm, to express his ideas, right? It is obvious to me that Leto is just a vehicle for Frank Herbert's ideas, which is a bit disappointing because if you use your characters simply to deliver your ideas without taking the time to develop the characters as well, the characters sort of disappear in the background, and all you have is this mouthpiece that expresses your ideas for the writer. This is exactly what's happening in this book. Leto II, the God Emperor, he becomes a vehicle for Frank Herbert's ideas. And I don't mind that much. Because, as I said, his ideas really pop off in this book. It's a sad thing that Leto has been downgraded to being this mouthpiece. I would have wanted to see and hear more about him personally. Every time Leto Atreides, the God Emperor, speaks, it's all about, he speaks almost in tongues. He is a lexicon. He is a thesaurus. He is a dictionary, uh, which makes him not that much of an endearing character. He is a mouthpiece, unfortunately, right? What Frank Herbert explores in this book, it's a wonderful thing because every time government, leadership, religion, when all of these are mentioned here, either in the excerpts or spoken about by Leto II, I'm just captivated, I'm fascinated, and most of all, I actually agree with a lot of what Frank Herbert explores here. Uh, he, something stood out to me. Uh, he says in this book, somewhere in the beginning, through Leto, I believe, he says, when a society becomes over uh, machine like, when a society becomes so machine like that people begin to use other people as if they were tools, right? So any sort of humanity, is removed from the equation, right? And that stuck to me. And he talks about, when societies and nations become, these aristocratic bureaucracies that actually hinder, the development and the elevation of the people and of the nation itself. Because, of course, a bureaucracy cares more about, having paperwork and having the right forms and having reports. And those reports have to have reports, and then you have to file all of these reports. And he says that, all of these experts that are so professional in this bureaucracy that is, nationwide. It is a system of bureaucracy. When these professionals obsess over these reports, they do so as an excuse to excuse their incompetence, right? So this philosophy about this bureaucracy that is a cancer upon the world, it just struck a nerve to me because I've always had these ideas about bureaucracy just being probably the worst thing that we could have done as a society. Uh, a, and it is true what he says that bureaucracy now has been elevated to an aristocracy where it's just so convoluted, so exaggerated, so aggrandized, so convoluted that there's no beginning and no end with bureaucracy. It's like the snake that eats its own head. It is endless, infinite, right? And bureaucracy is here to simply waste your time. Bureaucracy is here to give you, the people, the illusion that work is being done, that serious work is being done by professionals and experts. And of course, if you've been paying attention for the last couple of decades, you understand that this is not the case, that real work is never really done. It is a illusion, it is a smokescreen, and Frank Herbert nails it down like nobody else. And I appreciate what he does by speaking about this, because this is a topic that has always fascinated me. The fact that people are so obsessed with this system that it is systematic, it is machine-like, it is soulless. There's no humanity, there's no personality. Right? That is bureaucracy, and bureaucracy is king in this world, right? I mean, he has a lot of fabulous quotes about government, about leaders, how a lot of leaders are so incompetent, right? And the people who elect these leaders and who fetishize and fall into idolatry over these leaders, because I don't know why, right? It is a serious problem that I don't think we can solve it. I don't think we can solve it at all. As long as people don't wake up and realize that all of these systems are completely, deceiving and just wasting time and precious funds. I mean, we're pretty much doomed. We're doomed, basically, right? Essentially, Frank Herbert writes amazingly about all of this: government, religion, how religion is used by the people yet again to excuse their incompetence and to you know, excuse themselves for living a mediocre life. I mean, Leto somewhere in this book says, most people think that it is their mission, it is a wonderful accomplishment to lead a mediocre, stale, bland, average, ordinary life. They think that that is an accomplishment. And we find out that Leto, as deranged as he is, in a way, he values surprises. He values the random happenstance of things, because he has created a world that is completely managed, completely controlled, as if he has become the embodiment of a bureaucracy that is both religious, governmental, and bureaucratic. So in this book, the story is, it's been about 3,500 years from the previous book, Children of Dune. We know that Leto II has merged, has fused with the sandfish, and he has become a sort of hybrid. He has become a sort of quasi sandworm, a sort of quasi, an in-between human and worm. And he is the God Emperor. There isn't a story per se in this book. Like I said, this is just Frank Herbert using Leto as his mouthpiece to deliver his various theories and opinions. So the story in itself has lost a great deal because of this. The characters themselves are subpar at best. They are lukewarm. Now, this is I keep mentioning this in every review of Dune that I make. And Frank Herbert, I have to mention this yet again. Frank Herbert does this thing that in every book he writes, he introduces new characters, mostly secondary characters that are just not important. Or I should say, they could be important, but Frank writes them in such a way that they are irrelevant to me as a reader, right? In this book, we have a cast of secondary characters. We have members of the Bene Gesserit. We have Moneo, who is the God Emperor's butler. We have his sister, Siona, right? And of course, for some reason, yet again, I've been trashing Dunkin' Donuts Idaho every fucking book. But I have to say it again. Dunkin' Donuts Idaho makes an appearance yet again in this book. And listen, I hope somebody can explain this to me. I don't understand why Frank is so obsessed with Dunkin' Donuts Idaho as a character that he has to bring him back every book. Right? And I understand he is a Gola. He is constantly brought back by the God Emperor Leto because he has some sort of attachment to this Dunkin' Donuts Idaho. And we find out that Dunkin' Donuts Idaho has been brought back by the Ixians time and time again for almost 4,000 years because the God Emperor, he gets angry sometimes and he kills people sometimes because of his anger. And when he gets angry, as the butler Moneo says, the worm comes out. So we find out that even though Leto is this almost all-powerful, omniscient, and so on, this entity, he is caught in this vortex, in this duality, that the person Leto is comprised of one, the God Emperor, and then there is also this worm entity that lies inside of it, right? So Leto now is a quasi-worm, but he has human characteristics. He has his face, he has little arms, he has legs, but they are, they are degraded. And his entire body is this sort of imitation of a sandworm. Or I should say, he is in a constant process of becoming a sandworm, right? So for almost 4,000 years, Leto II, the worm, the God Emperor, has been this almost universal dictator. He has stopped progress of any kind. He has brought life itself in his empire to a stalemate, to a stagnation, which was intentional and premeditated because Leto has this golden path. Now, maybe I got bored and probably didn't really pay attention, but after two books, Children of Dune and God Emperor, I still don't know what this golden path is that is still mentioned time and time again. I don't know what it is. But apparently it has something to do with the survival of humans and life itself in the universe. And it all hinges on Leto being a universal dictator and keeping his subjects, on the brink of poverty, on the brink of barbarism, we find out that most of the people, especially the people on Arrakis, they live in pretty primitive circumstances, and that is intentional. Because the Golden Path, and something about the Golden Path is, after Leto dies, people are gonna change or what have you. Like I said, I don't really understand this Golden Path. Yet again, the Bene Gesserit makes another appearance in this book, and I have to reiterate: the Bene Gesserit, to me, is not a threat. The Bene Gesserit is not a danger. Uh, you know, the Bene Gesserit, with all of its skills and aptitudes, the Bene Gesserit is laughable to me, and Leto has made sure that the Bene Gesserit knows its place in his empire. So the Bene Gesserit now pretty much has no power. It has become a sort of lackey, a sort of servile servant for the God Emperor. A couple of members of the Bene Gesserit show themselves in this book, but they are, they're not even secondary characters, right? So the Bene Gesserit, it's lame. I have to say it. The Bene Gesserit is a laughing stock, you know. Uh, Again, we have antagonists here that have been mentioned in